So my name's Wendy, and just to give you a little bit of background about myself. So I'm a chemical engineer, and I have an accounting degree as well. I have worked in the engineering sector, in the mining sector, as well as the finance sector for a number of years, and now I do a lot of consulting work. So today we'll be just discussing some broad things. So really, a lot of students really don't enjoy mathematics. So really, I just want to talk to you about the application of algebra. Sometimes people just don't understand why they are doing mathematics and how this actually applies. So I'll discuss with you the benefits and the application of algebra and how you can actually see the bigger picture. And then we'll go through some tips and tricks for studying as well as exam prep. So first of all, what is algebra? Algebra is all about relationships. So different variables having relationships with one another and putting that into a specific formula. And from that, you can draw graphs and other relationships with that. So there are so many professions out there that use algebra on a daily basis as well as on an ad hoc basis. So everyone from actuaries who really work in the life insurance sector, as well as just general insurance, to architects, computer engineers, and analysts, which is really the future, economists as well, when they're predicting and forecasting what will happen, market research analysts, dietitians and nutritionists, engineers, the whole spectrum. I can guarantee you uses algebra throughout their career. And then, geologists use it, and everything down to morticians and social scientists. So algebra is really used in so many different professions, and it's so important that students get this and use this in the future. So some real life applications of algebra. So a good example is the stock market. So the JSE or the New York stock market, they all use algebra in some form, some shape or form. So for example, you get fundamental analysis as well as technical analysis. A lot of traders use this to be able to determine when they should actually trade and when they shouldn't trade. So when they buy and sell stocks. So this is a real life application, and they use linear algebra to predict or forecast what they believe will happen to the stock price. Something that I know a lot of kids are involved in is video games. And you don't realize it, but there's so much science and maths behind video games. And there's so much that's just happening. So for example, video games actually use vectors. And that really is like incredibly important to be able to determine a position, a velocity, as well as a direction. So for example, if your child or you are playing a video game where you may be shooting someone or you're running around in the video game, it's critical for vectors to be used and that's linear algebra to determine where, for example, you're shooting, where you're running to in the game, and so forth. It helps with the whole 3D and 2D gaming. So next time you're playing your video game, just remember algebra is in the background. Then you get experiments. So for example, if you want to do a scientific experiment and you want to try and determine what happens when I change something. So for example, you can even use it with a motor car. So if I put my foot down, at what pressure do I put my foot down and what acceleration do I get? And you can get a whole lot of different data points for that. And that can then be plotted on an XY diagram. So then the whole purpose of an experiment is to try and find a relationship between two different variables, your X and Y variable. So once you've plotted these data points, you can then try to determine the relationship. And in these two cases, you can see that a linear graph or a linear equation actually fits most suitably. So on the left-hand side, it is quite scattered, and the confidence limits will be quite wide. or low, and it doesn't fit the linear equation very well. However, if you look at the graph on the right-hand side, there's also a linear graph used, or a linear equation used with a 95% confidence limit, which means that most points will be within 95% of this line. So you can see that this is another way that lots of scientists actually use data and linear algebra in everyday life and application. Then you get things like facial recognition. So, I mean, the whole future is about, machine learning and artificial intelligence and all this computing and all this power. And there is so much algebra in the background because they're different variables with different relationships, and they all need to work in the background. So facial recognition is something that's really, really powerful. This will definitely happen at some point in the banking industry. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of algebra in the background. So this actually uses an algebraic technique called principal component analysis. And yeah, this is just another application of algebra. You Google stuff every day. Well, guess what? You're using algebra in the background. Google and other search engines as well use page ranking. And essentially, it's relationships between the different pages, and they're able to then rank which pages should be higher than others. And this really helps them to make the most relevant pages appear first on when you search for something. That, as well as you get search engine optimization and all sorts of things. And this is all important in ensuring that the most relevant information is displayed first. So we've covered essentially the application of algebra, and it is really, really massive. You can use algebra in every day. It goes from everything from science to finance to, medical and medicine. So, algebra is so, so important. So it's critical for students to make sure that they see the bigger picture so that they can get excited about algebra. Algebra is so important for problem solving skills when they're actually out of school, in university, and in their career. Because, analytics, computers, it's the future. So if they don't learn to love algebra and love maths and the application thereof, then they might fall behind. So in terms of career, it is critical. So I just thought I'd go through a few approaches to studying. And how students can actually go about it. So most important, understand the fundamentals. All the time I tutor students that are trying to actually apply what they think they know, or try and wing it, or may have listened to the teacher in a certain way and they don't want to go through the examples, so they'll just try and answer the questions. And then they don't get it right, and then they get frustrated, and then they go online. So most important, understand the fundamentals. So some key things: listen in class. It's the easiest way. It's the best starting point. Okay, work through examples. Don't just read the examples. This is really, really key. Actually go through the examples, try and do them on a piece of paper yourself. Make sure you understand all the different steps. If you don't understand the different steps, you need to ask for help. Don't just read them, work through them. You need to really master the key concepts. Maths is a sequential subject. So what does that mean? It essentially builds on itself. So, if you are learning about linear equations and drawing tables and so forth and graphs, that is the basis for eventually being able to draw polynomial equations and graphing that. So it is really, really important that you understand the fundamentals and make sure that if you get lost, go back and try and figure it out. Also key is taking proper notes. If you are in class, make sure you write down everything you can. It needs to be legible. You need to be able to, you should be using highlighters, different colored pens, highlighting key points and things that you can go back to and really understand, and having reference notes. Do not memorize concepts or shortcuts. Sometimes teachers will show you some shortcuts on how to do things, but if you don't understand the fundamentals first, or how or why you can do that shortcut, don't do it. Go back to the basics and make sure you understand that properly. Then practice, practice, practice. But you need to make sure you have the answers. And what do I mean by that is, often students get lots and lots of questions from their teachers, but they don't have the answers to them. Students should really have the answers readily available, and they should be working through the answers as soon as they're finished with the different questions. And that means, because that just means that it's fresh in their minds, they can go through the solution, not just checking whether they got it wrong or right. They need to go through the different solutions, especially those ones where they got it wrong. And then they need to mark them and make sure they then understand it and try to go through the example, or go through the solution and understand where they went wrong. If they still don't understand where they went wrong, you need to go back to your teacher, or you need to speak to your tutor. You need to review your errors. You need to be honest with yourself and try to identify the areas where you struggle. So are you making silly mistakes somewhere? Do you skip steps by accident? Where exactly are you struggling? Do you struggle with moving a number from one side of the equation to the other? Do you struggle with multiplication or division? You need to just identify which areas you're struggling with. You need to really, what's really important in maths is doing all the different steps, because when it comes to marking, if you've made a silly mistake somewhere, the teacher can actually see that and they can give you marks. You need to also work through the solutions. So, if you've made an error, once again, go through that solution, make sure you understand where you're going wrong. And if you don't understand, speak to your teacher or tutor. You really need to create an environment that's free of any distractions. So some people do really well with studying with background music, but it needs to be really quiet. It needs to be, not a song where you're going to want to sing along and dance. That's not the sort of music you need in the background. So either you need to have no noise in the background, or you need to maybe have some music, you could even be doing your homework or studying in the kitchen when having your family around, but you've got to have as fewer distractions as possible. So then the environment is really, really important. You have all your equipment, all your notes, everything together, so it makes it really easy for you to study. You shouldn't be spending a large amount of time getting ready to study every day. What's also really critical is working under exam conditions. So what happens is you need to be honest with yourself and say whether you actually are able to finish exams and tests on time or not. If you're the type of student that is able to finish a test paper and you've got a lot of time left, then okay, you're lucky. But you really need to work under exam conditions when you're prepping for you just before the exam. So you really need to do some past papers and really put in some time constraints, so that this really helps you when you get to exam time and you're actually writing the paper, because it's putting some pressure on you to do the past paper. So it will help you and prep you to actually be able to do the exam. And you really, really need to believe in yourself. Being anxious and being worried and scared is really, really not going to help you. Again, this goes back to actually doing some exam prep. So if you're actually able to work under exam type conditions, that will really remove a lot of the anxiety and will really just help you prep for that. then you really need to learn to ask for help when you need it. You shouldn't feel like you're competing with your classmates, or that you might feel dumb, or anything like that. I can guarantee you some of your classmates will have similar problems that you will, or you might be good in other areas that they aren't. So do not be scared to ask for help. Ask for help from your teacher, your parents, or your tutor. And I really and truly believe struggling is good for you. It really means that, you know, you are learning something and you should be excited about that. It would be so incredibly boring if, you know, everything was easy. That's not the point of school. That's not the point of university. You know, you should be struggling and learning and, you know, improving yourself. So struggling is good for you as long as you're moving forward and not holding yourself back. So that's the end of our webinar. I know it wasn't very long, but it was our first mathematics webinar. And in future, we'll be doing more specific webinars in mathematics. Please let me know if you have any questions.